All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We will dispense with the approval of the minutes due to a lack of a quorum and begin with my statement. Good evening and welcome to the New York City Voter Assistance Advisory Committee's public hearing for August 2019. My name is Naomi Zauderer and I serve as a member of the New York City Campaign Finance Board and as the chair of this committee. First off, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight at the New York City Campaign Finance Board office, including my fellow committee members and Jumani Williams, who is officially a member of this committee and is present here today. I welcome all of those who are watching on the CFB's live stream and on Instagram Live. We have an exciting program for tonight's hearing focused on youth voter engagement. In just a moment, I will turn things over to our street team hosts so we can get right into it. But first, I'd like to explain for just a moment what NYC Votes and the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee do. NYC Votes is a nonpartisan voter engagement and education campaign run by the Campaign Finance Board. NYC Votes publishes a voter guide for every election held in the city. We help New Yorkers register to vote and encourage them to get to the polls on Election Day. We provide information about voting rights, and we host televised debates and community forums with candidates. The Voter Assistance Advisory Committee advises the CFB on its NYC Votes activities and recommends changes to improve the voting experience for all New Yorkers. The mayor and speaker of the city council each appoint 2 members to the VAAC. Their appointments must be from 2 different political parties. The comptroller appoints 1 member, and the 5 borough presidents jointly appoint another. The chair is appointed by the mayor in consultation with the speaker. The city's public advocate, which is the second highest elected office in the city, and the executive director of the City Board of Elections also serve on the committee. One of the committee's primary concerns is considering groups of New Yorkers that are underrepresented among the voting population. One such underrepresented group is the city's youth population. With this in mind, we've called this meeting to provide a forum for government officials and voting rights advocates to hear directly from our city's youth, to understand how we can communicate and share information more effectively with young voters and potential voters. Our goal tonight is to hear ideas that will help us get young people more involved in the political process and ultimately increase their participation in our elections. All forms of testimony provided tonight will be assembled and delivered to the NYC Board of Elections and the New York City Council. We will continue to accept testimony after the hearing as well if you did not prepare something in advance. But rather than leading this meeting ourselves, for the first time in this committee's history, we're relying on our youngest paid staff members, known as the NYC Votes Street Team, to facilitate this discussion amongst their peers. All of this planning, coordination, and outreach for this meeting was conducted by this outstanding group of young people. We owe these young voting advocates a big round of applause for making this wonderful audience possible. And so again, thank you all for coming tonight. We're all looking forward to hearing your perspectives. Before I pass the mic to the street team to get things started, I would like to give Jumani Williams the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Can you hear me? All right. Very few words. Peace, everybody. This is pretty dope. So thank you for putting this together, and the folks who got all the young people. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. So I'm not going to talk too long. I want to hear them. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So, and with that, I will pass the mic to the street team.
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction. There you go. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. My name is Olivia Brady, and I'm one of the members of the Summer Street Team. I just wanted to say a few words before we get started. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and listen to the voices of all the young people in this room. The We the Young People hearing today is a space by, for, and about young people sharing their experiences and their perspectives on civic engagement, local government, and how their city interacts with them. While our agency has a specific focus on voting, we recognize that for young people especially, civic engagement can mean so much more. Our street team, a group of 6 young interns, has spent the summer expanding our youth outreach and engagement efforts in order to advocate for a more holistic understanding of civic engagement as it pertains to young people. Today, we would like to highlight what we've learned from the more than 1,400 young people we've met with over the course of over 27 citywide workshops. During these workshops, we found that students cited a significant need for access to information, decision makers, and spaces such as the one we are in today as resources through which to get more deeply involved in their communities and their local government. Today, we have about 20 young people who are going to share their experiences and make recommendations to the board regarding programming and resources that would benefit them. In addition, about 10 other young people have submitted written testimony to our board. One of our key objectives in this hearing was to train youth on how to testify at public hearings so that they may have the skill set to do this again in the future. Almost all of our testifiers have worked with one of our street team members in order to help them prepare effectively. If you are testifying today or if you have submitted written testimony, please stand or raise your hand so that we can honor all the work you've done today. Our VAAC hearing today is unlike any other hearing our agency has ever hosted. We are extremely grateful for this opportunity to have worked with the youth of New York City. We hope that today is the first step in learning how to further support, amplify, and work with you going forward. So thank you guys, really. Finally, I would like to thank the incredible NYC Votes and Campaign Finance Board staff for their hard work and openness to hosting an event so different than anything we've done before. Sabrina, Sean, and Matthew, thank you so much for your guidance and entrusting us with planning this really important event. William, thank you so much for helping us with our social media. Kitty and Eric, thank you guys for organizing the room and for getting all the snacks together. We really appreciate it. To my street team members, we could not have contacted about 3,000 people without all of our collective efforts. And to Amy and our board, thank you so much for making this space and for really listening to us today. I'm really excited to see what our agency is going to do going forward. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much. And so I just want to name our street team and have them stand up so that they can be honored. They're going to testify at the end, but I would like to honor them now. So Kevin, Maya, Olivia, Adriana, and Emily, please stand up. So thank you so much. Really an impressive. I mean, we've had the street team for about 6 years now, but this team has really outdone the effort. So thank you. This is an incredibly inspiring group of people and incredibly hopefully a really great testimony we'll hear from all these young people today. I'm really excited. So let's start. Let me just tell you a little bit about how we're going to work so we keep things moving. I'm going to call 4 names up. So it's one person can stand at the podium and the other 3 can sit here next to Leah. And so that you're ready to testify us when they end. And when we get to the second person, I'll announce the next group of people so that we can keep the flow moving. But I think you're in order anyway, so it shouldn't be so difficult. I apologize in advance because I might not mispronounce your names. So please feel free to correct me when you come to the podium and say your name correctly so that everyone can hear your name correctly. But again, I apologize in advance if I do mispronounce your name. I'm sorry. Lisa Kazmir, Arturo Olivia, I'm reading my. Okay, Ashley Fontanilla. My bad Spanish pronunciation, sorry. So why don't you kick us off?
All right, so is this on? Okay. How's everyone feeling? How's everyone feeling? So my name is Nepal Kia Zulu. I'm 19 years old, and I'm the president of Black Lives Matter Greater New York, also founder and CEO of my national campaign, Vote 2000, and the newly crowned Miss Liberia USA. You Liberian? Yeah, okay. So today I'm going to talk about the intersectionality of youth civic engagement. I am a young person from an impoverished inner city right here in New York. I'm from Brownsville, Brooklyn. And the realities of young people growing up in the inner cities are absolutely horrendous. We don't have access to the most basic resources. All of the resources in New York City are allocated in all the wrong places. My community, our recreational centers are broken down. Our schools have nothing. My alma mater, Boys and Girls High School, is the campus I went to, and the school inside of it was Nelson Mandela School for Social Justice. We had absolutely nothing. All of the laptops were broken. We had to scavenge for ones that decently worked. We barely had textbooks. We barely had preparation for the regions. I'm sure all the young people in here are aware of the regions, right? Yeah, like we didn't have the necessary tools to prepare us for these things. And then people sit back and wonder, why are these communities so poor? Why are these communities afflicted with so much violence? Oftentimes, people that grow up in an impoverished inner city, AKA the hood, we're told, stop making excuses. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps. Work hard. How can you do that when you do not even have the foundation for boots, yet you're telling me to pick myself up? People fault oppressed groups and young people growing up in inner cities for the lifestyles they may go into in an effort to survive. A lot of people end up on the streets, selling drugs, getting into the wrong things as a means of survival. But from the outside looking in, all everyone else sees is, they're just gang members, they're just thugs. When I talk to these people, they tell me, if I had the adequate resources, these young people that are involved in this stuff, because I'm heavily involved in my community. When I talk to them, if I had the resources that could actually help me, I wouldn't be doing this. I would not be involved in these kind of things. But it's like, nobody cares about us. Nobody cares about the trauma that we go through growing up in an inner city. Nobody cares about our everyday realities. We're just left to fend for ourselves. So in May of 2017, I came up with this idea to get young people all across in the projects in New York City and primarily in Brooklyn registered to vote because they took civics out of our inner city schools, which is something that I'm advocating to bring back into all schools across New York City, because it is not a privilege to have access to civics, which helps us function in a so-called democracy. It is a right. So what I did is I went inside all the projects and I just started registering people to vote along with a friend of mine. And it was, initially the response was like, why should I vote? Like, none of these politicians care about us. The only time we see them is when it's time for a vote. But other than that, we don't see the elected officials. And that's true. We really don't see the elected officials inside of our communities. But I told them it's way more than that. It's so important that you get civically involved, because a lot of the things that's going on, we don't have an input in it. So then when like a policy is passed and we're sitting here like, but we didn't know. And that's because, we're not civically engaged enough. So my mission through my campaign now, it's like Vote 2000, my national campaign that I was able to launch was to continue that effort, because between registering people in the projects and then registering people on my campus, I got around 200 people registered to vote. But I wanted to think about how can I keep that momentum up? And so I came up with the idea of Vote 2000. And long story short, I was blessed enough to partner up with DoSomething.org. And they helped me with everything that I needed. And in partnership with DoSomething.org, not only did we get young people from impoverished communities registered to vote, but young people all across the country. And we got over 100,000 young people registered to vote last year. So thank you. Thank you. So, it's just extremely important to me to make sure that marginalized communities and disenfranchised communities have a voice. So I'm that voice for young people in the hood that, feel like people don't care about them. I let them know that there's still someone out here fighting for you, someone that cares about you. And, that's why I'm here today. And I'm just so inspired, by all the young people. And we have Jumani here, who is an elected official that's here, and all these wonderful people on the board that are just really here because they really care about us, especially in this political climate right now. It's in disarray. Everyone knows that gun violence is a really heavy topic right now because of the recent mass shootings. And before I'm done, I just like to bring light because I'm pretty sure a majority of you don't know about this mass shooting that just happened in my community on Old Timers Day, which, sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. So, thousands of people were out there for Old Timers Day. And, bullets just started spraying. And 12 people were hit. One person has died. Other people are recovering, some in critical condition. And my community right now is hurting. When you walk through my hood, you can just see the people. Everyone, it's just depression. And people's nobody cares about us. We're not seeing this on CNN, HLN, Fox, whatever major media news outlet. Nobody cares about us, and that's why I'm just fighting so hard to bring awareness to all these issues so people can remember these marginalized communities, because we're out here. We're here. There are young people there that are suffering, and we need our elected officials to stand up and do what's right. Advocate for more resources in our communities. We need this. So, sorry. It's been really rough for my community. And, I'm just here on behalf of them and, marginalized communities all across this country. But, at the end of the day, to summarize this, we just need all young people, all hands on deck. And we also need to remember these marginalized communities and the voices that are forgotten about. And, voting is just not enough. That's just the first step. That is the first step. What I tell young people everywhere, once you get these elected officials in office, you need to be on them like white on rice. Hello, if you feel like they're not doing something right, I'm at your doorstep. What's up? No, really, I'm at your doorstep. So, it's people think that voting is just enough. And that's why so many policies just get ran across us we don't know what's going on. But we have to stay involved and continue to hold these elected officials accountable. And if they're not doing what we voted them into office to do, we're going to vote them out, period. And that's that. Thank you.
Well, you did an amazing job. I don't even know how to go after that, but I'm going to try. So I wrote something. I get a little bit nervous when speaking in front of people, but we're going to work this out. Acts such as voting help us to begin directing how we would like our communities to become. Right now in this hearing, we're a community, and I want to deviate from my speech a little bit to direct us into a moment of silence for the victims of Dayton, for the victims of El Paso. Not only them, but I feel like many people do not know that there have been 5 shootings that day, not just the 2 that were on the news, but 5 in general. And one happened in Brooklyn. I'm from Brooklyn, she's from Brooklyn, so they don't get reported often. And not only that, but August 2nd, August 3rd, August 4th, was there a shooting August 5th? But either way, there's been so many shootings. So we're going to take a moment of silence just for. Thank you. So I'd first like to thank God for each opportunity that He gives. I'd like to thank NYC Votes for their work and the initiation of this hearing. I'd like to thank Olivia Brady for contacting me and helping organize, and everything else. Sorry, I didn't. She emailed me. I'd like to thank everyone for being present in this moment to discuss this topic. My name is Lisa Kazmir. I am the president of the NAACP Youth and Collegiate Division chapter at the City College of New York. There, I double major in biomedical sciences and Black studies. I was raised by immigrant parents in Brooklyn, and despite the daunting cycle of jaded dreams and lack of resources that affect many in my neighborhood, my parents taught me that I should not be defeated by my difficulties, but to work hard, challenge limitations, and always ask questions. My mom said Google was my best friend. Seriously, it could answer any question. My family, my teacher, my life experience has guided me to cultivate my voice. On this journey of figuring exactly how I would use this voice, I always try to ask two powerful questions: why and how? After moving to Long Island, I began to ask these questions when realizing that my new community faced many of the same issues as seen in Brooklyn. Why did other neighborhoods have nicely paved roads? How did other high schools have better resources? Why don't I have more teachers that look like the student population? How do we begin to understand the policies that affect our learning and our resources? Although I began asking these questions, I was never really interested in politics. The first time I learned about the election process was at the ripe young age of 8 years old during the Obama-McClain election. It was all thanks to my fourth grade teacher who assigned the class a coloring exercise to help visualize the states won by each party. Did that make me engage in politics? No. Did that keep me from sleeping in any of my other U.S. history classes along the years? Not really. But who doesn't like coloring? And I suppose that my 12th grade teacher came to the same conclusion when assigning the same assignment to the class. While the whole nation was divided, our teacher took the opportunity to take an interesting election to discuss the impact of media in elections, the reasons people vote, the power, the true power of each branch of government, the long roadmap to the election process as we watched it unfold in real time. We did not discuss which side was the correct side. Rather, we discussed the strengths and weaknesses of each candidate and how the media turned them into caricatures. Each lecture was like a conversation unpacking the chaos of policy and government. My teacher also encouraged us to ask questions and even go out into the community to get some of them answered. And I suppose that's what stuck with me. It's important to ask, why aren't young people voting? Why don't we write letters to our representatives or even know who they are? But schools, educators, activists, we must also ask, are we teaching these skills? Are we teaching these skills? I can testify firsthand that community engagement and hands-on projects make a difference. It is necessary that organizations partner with schools to encourage students to get engaged in wanting to improve their community. We must encourage questions because the right question can drive activism, or at least ensure that we vote for dedicated representatives to enforce policies to protect us. It all begins with asking a question followed suit with action. Voting is a question and an answer. Voting is an action, and voting is a choice. Thank you.
Okay, well, hello. I'm not as poetic as the my two former testifiers, but I am far more blunt. And I'd like to start off by thanking the VAAC board. Thank all of you for coming. Now, to begin into my testimony. So my name's Trill Drew. I go to school in Flushing called John Montana School. And I would consider myself a very civically engaged young person. I've been in all levels of it. I participated in a voter drive in my school that got 14 people registered out of a school of 3,000. And I've also gone to a program that took me to the nation's capital for 3 weeks. And across all of that, I've observed a lot. And I noticed what really separates the kids that are civically engaged and understand and those who just don't. And the problem isn't that they're lazy and that they don't want to, and instead they actually have a strong voice and they want it to be heard. But the problem is this cycle that I've seen happen time and time again. I don't have a name for it, but I can describe it. And it relates to three main factors that go into what makes a civically engaged young person. Those being information, confidence, and time. You see, young people lack the information about their local government and its functions, and then they lose confidence in their knowledge base, and they're deterred from civically engaging. And then, because they're deterred from civically engaging, they take up time at school. And because they take up time at school, they don't get the chance to inform themselves about their local government and its functions. And I've seen it happen time and time again. And the kids who do go to these programs, who do voter registration drives, they've managed to make time for themselves and actually try to learn a little bit. But this should come as no surprise, because our New York City schools do not teach about our local governments. They teach about the structure of the federal government. Civics is no longer a class in quite a lot of schools. And the issue, and well, what you can say is, well, why don't you teach yourself? And to that, I would say that it's a bewildering and confusing process to teach yourself about civics, especially in our city. So long story short is, I would like to, and what really exemplifies this is if you go to New York City websites and there's a section dedicated only to structure and voting, you click the link and you go into the voting section. There is one link in that section. It's to file a complaint about a poll box that doesn't work. It doesn't teach you where to vote, how to vote, what you can do to register yourself. We're just at a disadvantage. And simply put, if you cannot teach a generation to vote and about their government, you cannot expect them to vote and to influence the government.
Hey, where is the link?
NewYorkCity.gov, the official website of the city of New York. You click the link to government and voting, and then there's three links. One is governments, one is about officials, and the other one's voting. You click the voting link, and in that link, there's supposed to be a series of links, but there's only one, and that is to file a complaint about voting machines that do not work. That's it.
Hello, my name is Ashley Fontanilla, and I'm so blessed. I'm so humbled to be here, and it's so humbling to be here with you all. I think at the heart of everything that we're doing as young people, one of the things that we kind of shouldn't lose the sight of is the fact that when we do things, we do this because of others, never because of ourselves. And we don't say that, but always keeping that in mind and always pursuing and always being focused on that goal is constantly what we're doing. And seeing others grow and seeing that process take place is the rewarding experience of being a leader, of being voted into a position of authority, of having a say that will change lives. This is it. And without people, there wouldn't be a reason to get things done or a way. We do it because of each other. We have each other, and that is something that we constantly have to keep in mind as we go. And obviously, as I'm sitting here, we all have this one thing in common. We all hate injustice. And I can say that. There's very few things I hate, and it's that. And I think you all agree with me. When people are not receiving the basic things that they need to be a person in society, well balanced emotionally, physically, spiritually speaking, it's very hard for us to ask of them to contribute back to society in a way that is going to build everyone up. And I am a Trill Drew's minister in the Bronx. I am a New York Park Super Steward, and I am also a Mayor's Action Plan stakeholder in Castle Hill. So I like to give the example of a tree. When a tree is planted, it's not left alone until the harvest time. And a good caretaker will ensure that the tree is receiving its water, nutrients, and will act when weeds come to rob the tree of what it actually needs. Likewise, as humans in society, as a human in society who lives in the Bronx, I hope to be big enough to my local government so that when I have needs of affordable food, and I have needs of basic human education that is continuously going, not after I finish high school, not after I finish college, but there's constant educational programs put in place to make sure everyone is getting the basic information they need to go and vote, to go and act in society, to go and be informed about the importance of mental health in impoverished neighborhoods. That is something that is being met and is being pushed by our local officials. My community is one of the 15 national communities that have the Mayor's Action Plan. And I want to boast a little bit of how amazing this has been to me. It's an initiative created by Mayor de Blasio to decrease violence in communities by activating and encouraging residents to identify issues in our own community, and then us will come together and do something to fix it as a group. And there is one person who is pulling together all the local organizations. He's pulling together all of the residents. He's pulling together the mayor's office, and he's like, what do you guys need? Because I'm going to put you in contact with the right people. And that is something that if I were not in a community like this one, I wouldn't be able to be as engaged and be here, to have gotten here right now, because we're not taught anymore to be engaged. We're not raised anymore to be a part of a society and to speak and to continue contributing and being innovative as young people and to talk. So I found out about them when they put a flyer up, and right after the event, we're cleaning up a medium. They really didn't finish, but they had partnered up with a community, with an organization from Brooklyn. And when I saw the flyer, I went. Afterwards, I was like, so who's going to maintain it afterwards? Because this is my community, and I want to make sure that this kind of gets done. I was welcomed with the words of, you are more than welcome to take this further, as much more, we got your back. And as a young person, that is everything. That's all you need to tell me. I joined. I was sold, and without the special support, I wouldn't have been part of doing what I am right now, transforming communities. And my goal is consistently to transform lives. Even if it's just one person a day, I get out there, I work, I do my garden work, I do what I have to do. I go and help out as a volunteer in all the activities we're doing. And I make sure I talk to at least one person at a time, because that's all it took for me to get involved, and look how much I'm doing. So going back to the flyer, a question moving on for all of us is, or a question to keep in mind is always explaining the why. And as we go forward with pushing voting, also explaining why it's so important. Why is it something that you care about? And what does it give back? What is a benefit to the person that you are pushing this so much? And from what I understand, leaders are voted in to help people achieve the goals that better communities and the environment and find the root of the issues that are plaguing them, including the lack of participation in voting. Why aren't people voting? And then what can we do to actually solve that issue? So my kind of interaction with my actual assemblywoman happened where there was this big event, a renaming ceremony, and we were, I met her, the kids of the TA president who was in charge of NYCHA before our current TA president. And I also got to meet the assemblywoman. When I saw her, I wasn't going to say anything. A young person is not going to go up and do something that brave, at least I. And the engagement coordinator at our MAP site was like, hey, go talk to her. And I was like, got it. I'm going to go talk to her right now. And that's what I did. I shared with her the vision I have. And right now we're going to have a cleanup on the 18th to finish the project that I initially joined to do. And kind of those things are the things that we need in our communities to continue to engage our youth. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Trill Drew, and I'm a member of Manhattan Community Board 7 and the Vice President of the Stuyvesant High School Student Union. Since a young age, I've been fascinated with government politics, and more specifically, local government and community organizing. Throughout middle school, I followed the 2016 presidential election, as I'm sure many people in this audience did, closely reading the news, watching all the debates, attending rallies throughout the city. And although I always wanted to volunteer for a campaign, my age prevented me from even being considered. At the end of middle school, however, when I was 13, I had my first opportunity to volunteer for a campaign, which was a local campaign for district leader. That summer, I spent over 200 hours knocking on doors, phone banking, analyzing voter data. Since then, I've spent my summers volunteering on campaigns for state assembly, city council, civil court, and more. During the school year, I've been an active member of my school's student government, as well as various youth voice components of the DOE, including the Chancellor's Student Advisory Council. I've also been involved in my neighborhood. I helped found a block association and was recently appointed to my community board, Manhattan Community Board number 7. Throughout my experience in local government and politics, I found that youth have been systematically excluded from the conversations and decisions that most affect them. In order to become involved in local government and politics, I've had to work extremely hard to prove that I have the competency and knowledge to deserve a seat at the table, and that my voice and perspective holds value. I believe that the lack of youth outreach and communication on behalf of government is what excludes youth and their opinions from community conversations. This not only keeps youth in the dark about community affairs, but prevents them from engaging with civics, which leaves them incredibly unprepared to become civically engaged, responsible, and informed adults. My pathway to civic engagement has largely been the result of the work of a few elected adults who have brought me and other youth into political spaces. State Assembly member Yuli New of the Lower East Side gave me my first opportunity to play a direct role in politics through campaigning for her election. City Council member Helen Rosenthal's office gave me the insight into community organizing by training me to help facilitate the participatory budgeting process. And Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer appointed me to Community Board 7 when I was only 15, providing me with a voice and a vote in local government decisions on a board that had previously had no youth input. Choosing to value the youth perspective and youth participation in government, these elected officials gave me the opportunity to go back to my school and create a civic engagement course, which through a bi-weekly newsletter taught students everything they needed to know about local government, activism, and being involved members of their communities. It also provided them with real-life opportunities to intern, volunteer, and directly participate in their neighborhoods. As a result of my work on the civic engagement course and my involvement in government, I've come to two conclusions as to the reform necessary to increase youth civic engagement. The first conclusion is that civic education must start as early as preschool and must then extend throughout the entirety of a child's educational career. Students need to not only learn about the history of the country and the structure of our national government, but also about the history, structure, and impact of local and state government. Beyond rote memorization, students must also be taught what it means to be a good citizen, how to participate and have a voice in government through town halls, community boards, exercising one's right to vote. I believe that these efforts to expand civic education to students of all ages should be spearheaded by NYC Votes, but they will also require collaboration with other organizations, such as the DOE, that can ensure that this learning is accompanied by opportunities for youth to engage in real leadership activities. From all schools having student councils to students being able to represent their peers on school leadership teams, students must be able to practice their leadership skills and experience firsthand how our democracy works at every level of their education. Beyond education programs and leadership opportunities, the second conclusion I've reached is that youth need to have more opportunities and direct pipelines into government and politics, and that these need to start at younger and younger ages. There shouldn't be any reason for all youth to not have the opportunity to be vocal members of their community, and all youth should be able to intern, volunteer, and advise all of their elected officials. Direct participation in government not only brings youth perspective and foresight to important issues, but it also decomplexifies the bureaucracy and alienation often associated with local government, allowing youth to grow into adults with a clear sense of civic duty. Because of this, I don't believe that it is far-stretched to say that every single elected official should be required to have an advisory council of diverse youth from their district to ensure that youth voices are heard and that youth needs are met. Finally, I would like to applaud the efforts that the board has made to increase youth engagement, including these first steps to include youth in this conversation. I believe that our city is beginning to see a turning point in the way youth are viewed and involved in politics, and I'm hopeful that we may change our government to reflect that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jordan Alexandra Sanchez. I'm a 17-year-old from the Boogie Down. I'm also a beauty pageant girl, and I hold the title of Royal International Miss New York Teen. And thanks. I recently graduated from the Bronx High School of Science. We'll be attending Harvard University this fall. Thank you. Okay. I grew up in a household where education comes first because knowledge is power, and school is your first source of that. That's why my mother jumped on the prep courses for the specialized high school's admissions test when she first learned of them. Because of her efforts, I was fortunate enough to confidently walk into the test room and walk out with a spot at Bronx Science. But not everyone is lucky enough to have such a proactive parent. I first realized this in the start of 8th grade. Just a month before the exam, I talked to my peers about the high school search. Many of them wanted to go to Bronx Science or Stuyvesant, all top schools, but had Brooklyn Tech. But they had no idea of the SHSAT. People say over and over that New York City's public high schools, or public schools in general, are among some of the most segregated in the country, and I agree. One of the biggest problems I've seen growing up in the public school system is the segregation of knowledge. Students simply just don't know. So when the mayor modified the SHSAT in an attempt to diversify the specialized high schools, I had to disagree. Not only did it ignore the simple issue of kids just not knowing, it created a much more hostile environment in the specialized high schools. Black and Hispanic students faced Black and Hispanic students were much more ostracized than before, as their peers suggested that they only got in because of one thing or another, that they couldn't get in because of their own merits. Schools are not created equal, and this has greater effects than standardized test scores. In my last months of high school, students were encouraged more than ever to get involved. We received multiple presentations on the importance of the 2020 census, how it affects funding, how to vote and stay informed, and even one that registered all of us graduating seniors for the upcoming election. But this information and opportunity should not be a privilege reserved for some students and not others. It's a right. Every student should leave high school feeling encouraged, motivated, and excited to better the community around them. We shouldn't even give them the chance to feel let down or left out of the political scene. And I know adults like to think they know everything, but today I'm telling you it's okay not to. The best way to solve issues pertaining to communities is to speak to them directly. Ask for their feelings, learn their struggles. As demonstrated by the March for Our Lives and climate change protests, students are willing to speak. All you have to do is give them the microphone. The more you listen, the more faith they have in the local government and the more excited they are to participate in it. And I just want to share a little story. In the 2008 election, I was sitting on my mom's bed as the results came out. And of course, Obama won, and I was so excited to finally see someone that looked like me. But I remember at the time I was angry, and my mom was like, "Why?" And I said, "Because I didn't get the chance to vote." And this was me when I was 8 years old. And I feel like I still feel that way, even as a 17-year-old who will be able to vote soon. A lot of us youth feel excited and we want to, but we just can't. So because of that, we need your help. So please listen to us. Thank you.
Sorry, 1 second, sorry. Nepal, before y'all leave, so I have to head out, I apologize. Thank you all who testified so far. I'm sorry I can't hear everyone, but I had some questions, and anyone who testified can feel free to come up. I don't know everybody here, but shout out to Nepal. I know all the work that you've been doing. You all had some amazing testimonies. I'm probably going to steal your segregation of knowledge line because it was pretty dope. But the questions that I had were a lot of the issues, Nepal, that you spoke about and people spoke about. I didn't know if somebody wanted to talk about what you guys thought the connection to voting and those issues are more explicitly. And two, I would like to know what are some of the things that we can do in the committee and just as government to engage you more, because we always say we want to. I don't know that we're doing a good job, and how can we make it easier to vote? So those are kind of three pieces. If anybody wants to just speak on it. Anybody who wants to.
Okay. Oh, yeah. All right. So with the
So my role in this, like, again, is emphasizing the necessary need for resources. And like elected officials have everything to do with that, because you guys are the one that are voting on policies, like where these resources should be allocated. These are like, that's where all the decision making goes on. Like, we elect you guys in confidence that you guys will, you know, represent us. And that's something you've been doing. But as a system in New York, that's not what's been happening. So what I would say, like, for you to encourage your colleagues to, you know, go into these communities and assess them personally, speak to the people. Like, we're human beings, like, we're not going to bite you. Like, you know, a lot of times elected officials that come into our communities, they seem like very standoffish, they're like nervous, and they don't necessarily engage with the community. And that's why a lot of them are just blinded by the everyday realities of these communities. So, like, I would say going in, being personable and treating us like human beings, talking to us, hearing the issues that are affecting our communities, and really advocating for the necessary resources that these impoverished communities across New York City need. Because at the end of the day, you know, poverty and violence, these are all things that intersect. And if necessary resources are provided, like, it's statistically proven that if you provide people with the necessary resources that they need, you're more than likely to thrive. It's not rocket science, you know. So, you know, you see these wealthier communities, people wonder why they're thriving and so successful. It's because they have the necessary resources to do that. So, like, all that same energy needs to be kept for impoverished communities. And elected officials, like, I implore you all to, like, hold your colleagues accountable. Whether or not you like them, whether or not that's your best friend, whatever, you need to hold these people accountable if they're not doing what they're supposed to do. So, thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think a big part of people actively choosing not to vote is mindset. They feel like no matter if they vote, they will not be heard. So I don't know necessarily where that starts, because the defeatist attitude will kill any kind of motivation they have to get involved. So to me, I have always felt that my voice mattered, and that was in my middle school and my high school. And it starts with parents and how they treat their children as equal human beings rather than like objects and property. It starts with teachers actually valuing their students' opinions and creating little systems, mini democracies within the schools, and it just continues and grows from there.
So I have an example. You're talking about like how knowing about voting can help change specifically. So in my school, I remember in the 11th grade, I was taking a French course and the textbook didn't come in, and my French teacher would complain all the time. And then I went to Uniondale High School, and I don't want to put them on blast, sorry, but I went to Uniondale High School. It's I loved my high school. I love my high school experience. They're little minor issues, but what community doesn't? But we didn't have textbooks for that year, and my teacher would complain all the time. So I was very close with the Secretary of Treasury in my school. Weird bond, but it's there. And she and she would always like kind of, me and my friends, we would go to her office all the time, and she would tell us about, because she was involved in the community, and she would tell us about like how we can advocate for these things. So there was a board meeting at my school, because that's like the meeting grounds for it. And she said, come out, they're having a budget meeting, come. I said, me? I'm like 16, like what are we doing at a budget meeting? She said, come. And then they gave you, we saw the budget. I was like, oh, wow, we have money. And then they said, stand up and talk about your experience. Say that you need textbooks at the meeting. And I was just like, what? We can do that? So then I went to the meeting. It was me and a couple of my friends. And then I got up and I said, I need some French textbooks. And so then they said that they're taking into consideration, see how they can improve so that this doesn't happen again, all that. And the third, but the very fact that one person was able to inform me that I can say that, and it's not just budget meetings just saying, hey, I need some textbooks, but it's voting that happens. It's understanding when these votings happen, understanding that it's not just the presidential election that you have to vote for, because growing up, that's all that was publicized, just voting for the president, when honestly, he's just a figurehead. I mean, he has power. I'm not disrespecting presidents, but Congress has a lot of power, a lot, that it goes under the radar. And if you don't know where power is allocated, if you don't understand that, then you're not going to know where to focus and channel your energy. You're not going to know who to ask. If you can ask, of course we can ask questions, y'all. Oh, thank you.
Hi, so my name is Brianna Sia. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Generation Vote. So this is part of my testimony, so I apologize if I repeat myself later on. But to answer your question of what are concrete things that this committee can do, at Generation Vote, we spend a lot of time talking and registering young voters on college campuses. And so here are some things that we believe this board can do and work with its partners and other committees. The first thing, I think some other folks discussed this earlier, is that this board can conduct focus groups and surveys in our local communities across the city through its youth programs to understand what issues young people care about. We've heard many of these issues today. So basically instituting a program that's focused on what we call Generation Vote Student Opinions Research Initiatives. This could be expanded to students that may not be enrolled in institutions, but actually having a formalized focus group program, whether it be through this committee or other committees, is one thing that we highly recommend this committee do. The second thing that this board can do is that it continue its support for innovative reforms that remove structural barriers to access to the polls for young people. Things like automatic voter registration, on-campus poll sites, and increasing opportunities for young people to participate in the public financing system. I also think it's important that this board hosts educational workshops to teach young people about these structural barriers and how we can advocate for ourselves, whether it be in local government or even sending folks to higher institutions like the state legislature. The third thing this board can do is create a youth advisory group or designate a youth representative for this very committee. If we want to continue having young people's voices heard, we can make sure that we are represented in committees and boards like these. Another thing, finally, this thing that the board can do is convene potentially a CUNY-wide working group to design a campaign for registering college students and driving turnout to build on the recent efforts in the state legislature to mandate voter registration forms both in the CUNY system and SUNY system. And I'm going to be talking about this later in my testimony, but at Gen Vote, we're working with partners. I'm an active member of the Let New York Vote Coalition, which I know you've worked with, to have the first statewide youth focus summit on voting rights and engagement. And so I highly encourage that this committee consider similar events, whether it be educational and training workshops for our citywide youth that cannot make it up to Albany.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So unfortunately, I have to head out, but I know everyone's going to continue. I have my staff, my Director of Policy, Veronica Avius, who's over there, and my General Counsel, Elizabeth Guzman. So they're going to remain for a little while after. But I just want to thank everybody for coming out and for putting this together. So peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Okay, so we'll continue. So if Elizabeth Lopez and Zoe Markham could join the.
All right. So hello, my fellow New Yorkers. I'm so very happy to see you all. Thank you for the board. Before I start, I do want to thank the folks who made it possible for me to even be here. Honorable Gail Brewer, thank you for letting me intern. I know there might be some folks from our office here, and Councilmember Keith Powers, who was a mentor to me and helped me develop my leadership. So I'm very happy to see you all. My name is Dio, and I'm from the Bronx. I'm running for city council, and just like the sister New Paul said, and many of the folks, young folks here who have testified, our city councilmen, especially up in the Bronx, they do a good job, but they are not visible enough. And I don't know if it's because they have other commitments, but they need to be more visible. Young people need to be appointed to community boards because we are the life and the next generation that will carry on the torch of democracy and effective policy that will affect our lives and the people in our communities. So these words come to you at a time when we're demanding effective change and lasting change. However, at all levels of government, the dual forces of gridlock and bipartisanship have been slow to react to the pressing dangers of our time. I know a lot of us have been frightened or are extremely aware, hyper aware of the mass shootings, the gun violence, and it has to come to an end. I know Mayor de Blasio has a great initiative, the mayor's office, to end gun violence, as well as other electeds, but we need change now. Young folks can't be killed. Anyone's life being taken ruthlessly and violently is never acceptable, never has been acceptable. So the need for youth in our local government is now greater than ever, because those who seek power will inherit seats imbued with dysfunctional and outdated ways of enacting policy. From our languishing MTA to our city's housing affordability crisis, we're going in debt, student debt, and how are we supposed to find somewhere to live and start our lives if we're saddled with student debt? From the abandonment of our veterans and the LGBTQ plus community being so harshly treated by our nation's longest and oldest institutions, this again cannot be something we tolerate. So please, folks, support me and candidates like me, the brave men and women in this room, as we solemnly promise progressive change. And if the power that be defy us, we do not fear calling them out, because we have nothing to fear but fear self, like the great FDR said once upon a time. So thank you, folks. I'd love to connect with you folks afterwards, and thank you for listening to my testimony.
Good evening. Thanks for this opportunity. My name is Vishwas and I'm a rising senior at Stuyvesant High School. My love for politics and government comes from the power of public policy and the fact that our representatives have the capacity to greatly impact our lives. I share this passion with many young people, as you can see, around the nation, in fact, because we value the opportunity to share and contribute our energy and ideas while shaping the debate in our current polarized political climate. As the 2020 presidential elections roll around, we can already see high schoolers involved, watching debates, sharing their opinions on social media and blogs, joining campaigns as volunteers and interns. Our engagement comes from our hope to witness change in issues such as education, climate change, and healthcare that affect us and those around us. For this very reason, I have made it my utmost priority to become involved in my local and national politics and the community around us, to reinforce the power and importance of youth voice through my work as a student union president and student representative on my high school's school leadership team, working on campaigns for state senate, serving as an advisor on a congressional youth cabinet, interning on Capitol Hill this summer, and being recently appointed to my community board, Manhattan CB1. I've been extremely fortunate to have had these opportunities to become involved within the political sphere. I'm thankful for Congresswoman Maloney for being the only Congress representative in New York to have a congressional youth cabinet. This was my first major involvement with government, and I had the opportunity to learn about issues that impacted youth in New York. We not only interacted as a group with other congresswomen, but also got the chance to meet other representatives and community groups. We were able to engage in productive conversations. I went on to work for the congresswoman at her DC office this summer. Not only was working at Capitol Hill a dream come true, it exposed me to the realities of our political climate. I got a chance to see internal politics at play, observe partisanship as members called out one another across the aisle, work on policy initiatives, and witness the 9/11 compensation bill passed 2 weeks ago. Similarly, the New York City Department of Education has allowed me to look beyond my experience and move out of the bubble that I lived in. I've been exposed to the failures of our education system, the lack of resources that we keep hearing again and again. But I have also had the chance to take action to fix the problems that would benefit not only my school, the high schoolers at my school, the high schoolers across New York City. Additionally, I'm grateful to Council Member Margaret Chin for trusting my abilities and recommending me as a member for Manhattan CB1. As someone of age only 17, it means a lot to be given a chance to be in a room with adults, to provide a youth perspective on vote on matters that will impact my generation greatly. However, these opportunities are limited, and I believe that is the first issue we must address. As I mentioned, I've come across very few youth advisory councils for elected officials. Every elected official should be encouraged to replicate the model of a congressional youth cabinet. These advisory councils should serve as a platform for the youth to bring their perspective to the table, while allowing elected officials to get a diverse set of ideas. We should further create task forces for issues that involve and impact the youth most and let them carry discussion. We should aim to replicate forums similar to the one we are here today so that students can share their stories and opinions with a larger audience. Most importantly, we must do a better job in sharing with young people the opportunities that already exist so that they can participate in them. These opportunities should allow them to be part of their government. Let's make it our imperative to establish that the youth voice matters to us. While my previous suggestion helps those who are interested in politics, a bigger problem we have is the group of people we leave out that do not share the passion that we hold. This lack of passion should not translate into ill-informed decisions and voter apathy. So in order to curb this issue, we must instill certain values through education to students at a young age. I find it surprising that a large majority of American students do not take a government course. This translates into a lack of information about how our government works or even who their representatives are, and hence a lack of interest in something they know little about. However, there's a simple fix. Let's make sure that every citizen learns about their national and local governments. At the same time, understands their civic duties and what it means to be a good citizen. We can incorporate classes on civics and create platforms for service learning projects both inside and outside of schools to reach our goal. And I hope that New York City Votes can partner with the DOE and schools across NYC to bring this information to classrooms and promote youth involvement. So I'd like to thank the board for its commitment to increasing youth engagement and commend these first steps to include us, the youth, in this conversation. I'd like to end by reminding everyone, especially those my age, we are children, but that in itself should not render us meaningless. We will no longer feel meaningless or powerless, but we will find a way to make our voices heard. Thank you.
And so can Kimberly Collins and Izzy Fell come up?
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Lopez, and by now I have been involved into so many different social issues and like volunteer works that I was lucky enough to get the opportunity for. But 4 years ago today, I would like to share a little personal story. 4 years ago, not today, actually this month, but not today, I was sexually harassed. And at this moment, I did not know what to do. I tried saying no, nothing worked. And I didn't know I was sexually harassed until 2 years after. I didn't even know what harassment was, how it's a thing, or how common it was. And the way I found out was because I remember I was in my health class at school. I do believe that I have a very openly, like, civically engaged school, but we didn't even have like any sexual education class. We had a health class, and in this, I was lucky enough to have a really great teacher, and she actually explained to me that what happened in my situation, that's not good. That's harassment. So, and when I realized that, I didn't know what to do. I was stuck, and I guess throughout like going, I was 16 when I like really found out like this is harassment. And I remember writing like every single chance in my essays in my school. I had like I would always try making about like, hey, like as an excuse to figure out what like sexual harassment is and do more research on it and all that stuff. And throughout this process in my school, in my senior year, I was involved it's a program in the school called the Middle College National Consortium. And from there, I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to join another program called YVote. In this program, YVote, we actually got to delve into like specific situations, to specific issues, and I focused on gender justice. In gender justice, I got to learn more about sexual harassment and what can I do? How can I actually help my community in ways? And I really do believe that these programs and these opportunities are wonderful for us to learn, because I was ignorant as a 14-year-old. I didn't know anything. The knowledge was not over there. I didn't have any opportunities. But because my school was civically engaged to some extent, and now I have these programs, I feel more informed. And now I could go up and tell everybody, hey, I'm doing all this now. I've gone as far. I went to Albany to meet my senator and my assemblywoman. I've done things in my life now, and I'm going to make change. And I do believe these are the opportunities that we need. Like NYC Votes, this is amazing opportunity right here. And I really do hope that we create more for our youth and involve them that I believe that is what we need. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, sure.
Thank you.
My name is Zoe Markman, and I'm a rising senior at the High School of American Studies at Lehman College. Thanks for having me today. I designed New York City's first voting sticker 6 years ago when I was 10 years old, and I've been a huge fan of NYC votes ever since. So I'm very happy to be here today. About 2 years ago, I joined the Miseducation podcast, a group of 8 high school students who report on the segregation and inequity in New York City schools. Working on the Miseducation podcast was one of the first times I'd been in a truly diverse group of students. New York City, though we pride ourselves on our diversity, it has one of the most segregated school systems in the nation. From the age of 4, when I started kindergarten, I had mostly gone to school with people that looked like me. Working on the podcast was also one of the first times anyone had asked me what I thought about the education system and the segregation that pervades it. I've gone to public school 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., 180 days a year for 12 years. I ate in school cafeterias, yet I had no voice in how much money was spent on school lunch. Not enough, by the way. I prepped for months for the state test, the specialized high school admission test, and the Regents exams. Yet I had no voice in the scope and magnitude of standardized testing. I sat in segregated classrooms, yet I had no voice in ending the discriminatory admissions practices or creating a culturally responsive curriculum. Shirley Chisholm famously said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. The Miseducation podcast has acted as my folding chair, and I am grateful for that. But it's about time that students get a real permanent seat at the table. It's about time that the student members of community education councils and the panel for education policy are full-fledged voting members, rather than their current status as non-voting tokens. It's about time that civic engagement events take place after school hours. And if an event is at 5:30 on a Wednesday, I'm gonna need somewhere to put my backpack. It's about time New York City listens to student groups like Integrate NYC, Teens Take Charge, and the Miseducation podcast and integrates the school system. Thank you.
And thank you, Zoe, for designing our sticker, the Lady Liberty sticker. That was the first I voted sticker in New York City. So thank you very much for that design. Before you start speaking, can Babu Gaye and Azad Wahid come forward? Thanks.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Collins, and I'm an intern at the Future Leaders Incubator and a rising sophomore at Brown University. I grew up in New York public education system and understood the importance of voting from a young age. However, I am an outlier from many youth who have limited civic engagement and political efficacy. Throughout high school and into my undergrad college career, I've canvassed for candidates, testified in state Senate hearings, studied about the increasing epidemic of voter suppression, and most importantly, voted. While I have done my own personal insights to discover the importance of voting, much of my civic freedoms were hardly reinforced in the standard New York public education curriculum. I am arguing for the New York City Campaign Finance Board to invest their efforts into voter registration and education efforts for our youth. The option to pre-register high school seniors should be granted through every New York State public school in an effort to close gaps that keep students in other underserved communities from registering and voting. This nonpartisan ask is essential in directing students to be engaged voters and planting the seed that student voices should carry volumes in a government system that very much also affects them. In a society where frightening statistics about mass shootings, climate change, and unjust immigration policies appear on our phone screens just as much as pictures of our friends, we deserve to have our voices and thoughts acknowledged. To do this, we must advance history lessons about American democracy by pushing a fundamental right that gives each citizen power, the right to vote. Students are suffering as they grapple with the consequences of their gender, race, and age as stories and news cycles become more and more frightening and divisive. Help us express our concerns. I am calling on the New York City Campaign Finance Board to make it a priority to pre-register New York high school seniors in schools and reinforce the importance of our vote so that when students turn 18, they have the ability to exercise their voting rights and support legislation that will improve humanity. We are ready to make New York State a place that does not turn its back to the voices of its youth. With the decrease in federal oversight of elections resulting after the Shelby County v. Holder decision, the floodgates have opened for states to block voting rights. Therefore, it is crucial more than ever that our state steps up to the plate to make sure that youth are given the tools to vote early and vote often. We are counting on you to believe in our future leaders and increase our visibility. We are here to engage in this work with you. Thank you.
Amy, I have a question. Aren't high schools already supposed to register students?
Well, there's a law that they have to send voter registration forms to every student who's graduating. And then there's also Student Voter Registration Day, that's once a year. And also the law changed to allow people to pre-register.
So are they not sending the things to the students? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, the Department of Education sends voter registration forms to the students. I believe they send it with their graduation packet, so sometimes it doesn't have the attention and the focus that perhaps it is warranted, and so there's more work to be done.
Quick question: how many students who graduated received voter registration cards? Well, you were in Long Island, right? But in New York City, raise your hand. Okay, I guess they're not real.
Sorry, but you're saying that pre-registration is new, though, right? So that just
for people for students who are 16.
Okay. So we haven't done anything yet to like.
But the high school requirement
it's
long standing.
Yes.
What I'm about to say kind of relates to that too, because I found that not every school has voting registration forms available for students who are maybe turning 18 before they graduate. So yes, anyways, to the members of the board and everyone else that came out today, my name is Izzy Fell, and I'm going to be a senior in high school this coming year. I am passionate about the issues surrounding voting, where I believe in the power of democracy. Yet, I feel that the efforts behind the voting process are flawed and in need of some improvements. I wanted to use this opportunity to speak to my experience and views on voting registration availability, specifically in New York City. I attend the Clinton School, a public school in Union Square. In my school, all students have access to voting registration forms, and we are encouraged to fill them out as soon as we turn 18. I think this is a principle that should be applied to all New York City schools. All high schools should have access to voting registration forms. If students aren't particularly interested in politics or voting, it is often the case that just circumstantially they do not register to vote at 18. If voting registration forms are available in all schools, there will be more exposure for young people. Students who wish to contribute to the policies that affect them, but either aren't aware of their voting eligibility or aren't particularly inspired by their voting eligibility, will have an opportunity to register in their daily lives. It is essential to encourage young people to vote and assist them in this process, because younger generations are the ones who are going to be affected by these policies the longest. The fact that my school has a supply of voting registration forms also speaks to the level of privilege and opportunity my school has at its disposal. The Clinton School is a predominantly white school with a well-funded parents association. We also have access to many school and technology supplies. With New York City having the most segregated school system in America, it is clear that the distribution of opportunities is associated with the diversity of the school. It shouldn't have to be this way. It is my recommendation that the board, as a first step in the right direction, makes the voting registration forms available at every single New York City high school. This is not a fix to the issue at hand, but an improvement. Thank you to the members of the board for your time and consideration.
Can Michelle Gullion and Ross Baroff come forward?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the VAAC board and New York City Votes for this great opportunity. It's not often that someone my age gets such a stage, so thank you guys. My name is Babu Gay. I'm a 16-year-old rising senior at the Bronx High School of Science. If you ask some of my peers what they got on the SHSAT, they're likely to say they've forgotten by now, as it's been 3 years. But if you ask me, I'll be able to tell you in a second, because I have to every time someone asks me, did you get in via the DREAM program? And that's just one of the many struggles someone of my complexion has to deal with as a student in New York City's segregated school system. As a first-generation African-American, one issue that strongly affects people of my background is the school-to-prison pipeline, specifically the local government's apathy towards New York City students who are threatened increasingly by it. With acts such as the approval of excessive budgets for high-tech surveillance to metal detectors in schools where the practice is deemed necessary, schools are gradually moving towards a trend of conveying to students that they are not to be trusted. This act treats students like criminals that must be invasively monitored instead of the future lawyers, doctors, engineers that we know we can be. Giving students and parents this message that the schools are watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake so we can be pushed into the criminal justice system is wrong. And it threatens our constitutional rights. It discourages us from engaging in peaceable assembly, from joining clubs and voicing our opinions, even voting, once the observation that we're under constant watch is realized. Students know this isn't here to help them, but to watch them. I became engaged in local civics through my school. That's how I got engaged in the Teen Activist Project at the New York Civil Liberties Union. That's how I got an internship at the ADL this summer. That's how I was elected vice president of my student body. I wouldn't be able to give you this list of accomplishments if I went to my local zone school, because I don't live in a community that's as affluent. My school also gave me an opportunity to interact with the Young Democrats Club freshman year, and I've been a member of the Model United Nations team, both of which have taught me valuable skills about diplomacy and politics. But I didn't learn about how political parties work or how lobbying works. I didn't know what a borough president was. We learned too much about, we learned not enough about local governments and far more about our national government. My experiences can only give me a deeper appreciation for the position I'm in today, the ability to give this speech. But I can't say that it's fair that someone who lives down the block from me and goes to my local zone school doesn't get this opportunity. It's not fair. With the ability to register as a 16-year-old and with no excuse not to vote, I'm more eager. But my neighbor might not be. And this isn't fair. That's segregation. The foundation that education has given me, is where we need to start on a local and federal level. The same voting barriers that people of my complexion faced 50 years ago, like vouchers and poll taxes, are not there anymore. But the segregation of education is still there, and that needs to change. So I implore you to do something about that and start with the schools. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nasat Wahid, and I am a member of White Vote. At the age of 14, high school commuters are given a green and white Metro card, through which they will explore our museums and libraries, our parks, food, and people, slowly falling in love with our city and coming to ownership of their title as a New Yorker. Eventually, these 14-year-olds will stumble across jagged roads and cracked sidewalks, inefficient transportation, crumbling infrastructure, biased judgment, and outdated laws, leading to a readjustment of their understanding of a city they came to love. Unaware of the power they'll come to hold in a matter of 4 years that would allow them to influence solutions to these issues, They will resign themselves to inefficiency and negligence. Had it not been for my pursuit of civic education through a youth voter activism group Y Vote, I would have been one of those teenagers. Our education system does nothing to fortify us with the knowledge of civics, nor does it grant us the opportunity to pursue that information. At 16, I was unaware of the difference between primary, general, and midterm elections, what policies my representatives stood for, who my representatives were. I was unaware of how to register to vote, how to vote, what to vote for, absentee ballots, affidavit ballots. Anything that would relate it to being civically engaged was out the window and nowhere near me. And these terms were all what influenced my answer to the question of should I vote, as I'm sure that they influenced all of you. Were you under these circumstances alongside me, voting would be of no significance to you. There would not be a reason for you to cast your vote when you had no idea on how to do so or what your vote was for. Granted, I was 16, but a year from then, my peers, now 17, still had no idea, and a year from then, my peers, now 18, still remained without answers. We allow children to have the power to progress through their experiences in our great city, but not the power or education necessary to choose the representatives that will allow their city to continue progressing. Nearly a month ago, I cast my vote for the district attorney. I posted on my Snapchat story a picture of my sticker captioned with, "The election is today. Go vote." Feel free to message me if you have any inquiries. And by far the most common question I received was, what was the election for? And that is ridiculous. Almost none of my peers were aware of this election, and they will not be if our high schools fail to educate them on how to vote and perform their civic duty. I recommend that New York City use social media and subway stations to inform the public of the election itself. If you would like to target the youth of our city, you must do so on their terms. You must make it a priority to hold interactive, discussion-based workshops within all high schools. You must push for mandatory training to be given to all high school students on the importance of voting and the manner of which to do so. Contact social media influencers to spread awareness of upcoming elections months before the election rather than days before. After Taylor Swift discussed early registration on one of her posts, a reported 65,000 voter registrations occurred in a single 24-hour period. And I'd like to comment on one of your inquiries about voter registrations within schools. When I was in high school, at the age of 17, my friend and I, we were one of the leaders of voter registration in our school. We had an official come in with a box full of stickers and cards, which is great. And so we went around asking my fellow students who are 18 to register to vote. But when you have someone come in unannounced into your school with no prior warning about what information you might need to register to vote, it's not going to get anywhere. And if you ask kids that had no prior exposure to civic engagement, they're not going to want to put their information down on this piece of paper and give it to a stranger. And that's what ended up happening. Out of maybe 100 people, I think I got one that day. And that is ridiculous. We need to utilize technology more in reaching our youth. I appreciate what efforts have already been done, but we need to do more. We are one of the leading beacons of hope to those seeking refuge, success, community, and efficiency. Let's make certain our youth understand this and use their civic power to maintain that standard. Thank you.
So can Brianna Sia and is Gusti Owens here? Okay, sorry, you weren't checked off on my list, but why don't you come on up?
Hello, my name is Michelle, and I'm a 15-year-old student at Democracy Prep Charter High School. Throughout my life with immigrant parents, I've always been urged to get a good education, go to college, do everything that they never got to do. And while in elementary school, we barely had any resources. The teachers were more focusing on at least getting, trying to deal with all the fights that would happen in school than actually getting us to know what the criteria was. When the state test rolled around, we were all racing to make sure that at least a good portion of the class passed. And during that time, I always thought, is this what I'm going to face for my entire life? That wasn't until I got into Democracy Prep. And during that time, one of the biggest things that we got to do was get out to vote, where we actually walked around the block and we urged people, giving them pamphlets, telling them the location and everything like that. And around the time, I myself didn't even know about all these things. And when I actually got the chance to learn about it myself, as I get out to vote every single year, and it just made me so happy to know that, hey, maybe I can actually change something. As I learn more and more about how, because of the poor education system we have in our schools, it leads kids down a very horrible path, where not only do they not just possibly get to the next grade, they can drop out of school, they can start a life of crime. All these bad things can happen with the fact that it doesn't seem like our government is taking the necessary caution that they are when it comes to the education system. We need them to start not only addressing this more, but address our opinions more. They look at our age and assume that because we are younger than them, our opinions do not count, which is honestly some of the most infuriating thing that I've ever had to face. Even if we are younger, that doesn't mean that our opinions are any less valid. And even like when I went to do my own research, I actually found out that according to a voter analysis report, all the years 2014, 2016, 2017, 2018, youngest group, 18 to 29, that could vote, almost every single year had the lowest turnout. And we need to stop that. We need to make sure that whenever we can, we vote, because our opinions will shape the future. Our opinions will be the stepping stone to the next generation. It will be a way for everyone to see that we are not just children. We are people that have a voice. We are people that want to share out. If voting, like said before, is only one step, we can do so much more. We have to push Congress to make sure that stuff that are passed are stuff that we actually care about. We have to make sure that if we are so infuriated by some of the things that are being passed, we step out of our comfort zone and even become politicians ourselves. We have to make sure that throughout all our lives, anything that happens is something that we actually want to happen. It won't just be also a way for a minority group to finally rise up, because too often we are just looked down upon as if we are not as important. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ross Baroff. I'm 24 years old, which I'm questioning whether that's still considered young or not. I'm a resident of Washington Heights, Manhattan. I work in the nonprofit sector, but disclaimer that I'm only here representing myself, and nothing I should say should be deemed representative of my employer. To start, I'd like to thank you and thank all of you for allowing this platform to exist, where the youth can come speak to you. I'm sorry to break it to you, but I don't have all the answers, but I actually have a few additional questions I ask you to explore further than what was laid out previously. When discussing how to increase voter turnout and the needs of my fellow young people, I often see the conversation focused around how can we get the important information to them? And again, I hate to break it to you, but young people don't really have that much trouble accessing the names of candidates, nor when and where to vote. The what, when, and where we can find out easily, especially considering most of us treat our phones like another limb. The why, however, is a whole different question. Some people teach that it's more about the beautiful question than any answer that can be given. But in this instance, the why is the most important. Why should we vote? With all due respect, why should we care about a special election where the field is almost as crowded as those aiming to be a Democratic nominee for president? Probably a good thing the public advocate isn't here for that one. Why should we care about who fills the role of a borough president? A role that not only do so many young people not know even exists, but can't grasp what purpose it actually fills. These are the stories that this committee can actually work on telling. Those are the questions that you can begin answering. And listening to my fellow youth at this hearing is just the first step. The fact that you're holding a hearing to listen to the voice of the youth is powerful and important. Again, with all due respect, it's not really enough. My generation, and I guess the next generation, I don't really know how that works, wants to be taken seriously. We want to be heard, and we want to know that our voice matters and isn't just listened to when a token is needed. Do you know that about 20% of New Yorkers are aged 18 to 29? That's a pretty fair range for what I call voting age young people. Yet when I look at this committee, I don't see a statistic represented. Not going to guess anyone's ages, though. If I may be so bold, let me quote from the charter of the committee, which you quoted a bit earlier. The mayor, speaker, comptroller, and borough president shall consider experience with groups or categories of residents that are underrepresented among those who vote. I say that 20% of the city's population is a pretty large category that's underrepresented and being ignored on this committee. I understand that as a committee, you don't get to decide who your peers are that join it, but you do have the power to recommend legislation even that can amend your charter to mandate the inclusion of a representative of the youth population. So I implore you to not only consider that, but actually act upon it. And I open myself up to you as a resource throughout that process, and also right now for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
All right, so you sort of heard from me earlier, so I apologize, it's repetitive. First off, I'd like to thank Olivia and all the members of the board and the committee for offering all of us the opportunity to testify today. And I'm grateful for all the courageous young people in this room who have shared their stories. And man, like, same, I didn't think I was old until I stepped into this room. But I really, not used to that. But I really implore all of you to start organizations, to tell your stories, recruit your peers, to come to hearings like these, and to run for office, because we can do it. So again, my name is Brianna. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Generation Vote. I'm also a researcher at the Brennan Center, wearing my Gen Vote hat for today. At Generation Vote, we are building a national movement that creates lasting political power for young people in their communities through a new model of engagement. Last year, we saw a dramatic increase in turnout among young voters in New York City. In a recent report by this very board, it reported out that turnout among newly registered voters between the ages of 18 to 29 years old increased by 32.9% between the 2014 and 2018 midterms. Yet despite a historic wave of youth engagement in the 2018 midterms across this country, our state had especially low youth turnout. A recent estimate by Circle at Tufts University found that out of the 42 states for which they have data, New York ranked second to last among states in youth turnout. I'm pretty sure Alabama was the only state behind us, and that says something. Just putting that out there. And so this leads us to think about a lot of important questions. I'm not going to go into why young people do not vote, because clearly we have heard from young people in our city of why they do not feel like their voices are being heard and why their peers are not going out to the polls. So at Gen Vote, we're constantly asking ourselves, how do we turn out young people in our generation? You see, we spend a great amount of time talking to young voters across this state. And quite frankly, a lot of the students that we work with live in communities where there is literally no civic infrastructure like what we have here in New York City. And so I implore this committee to actually work with and share the advice and knowledge that you have from your youth engagement efforts with counties and cities across the state, because we need you. So when we are talking to our students, they commonly report confusion and frustration with the registration process, similar to what you all said here. Many students do not know critical information about candidates running for office or where their polling site is on election day. But even worse is when students tell me that they do not trust their local government and that they feel like their voices are not being heard in an authentic way. And so why even show up if they're registered? And so during the 3 years that we have spent engaging young people and helping to set records for voter turnout on college campuses across the state, one of our campuses, based on our model of engagement and increasing engagement beyond election day, we're able to increase turnout by 300% in one community. We've gained some key insights about getting young people out to vote, because our model of engagement is built on the fundamental fact that our generation's votes are driven by issues, not partisanship. And that to turn out our vote, our issues have to be a part of the conversation year-round. And so like I mentioned earlier, there were 5 recommendations that at Generation Vote and our partner organizations we recommend you consider. And just to reiterate, the first one was to conduct focus groups and surveys and create an actual program that works with our local schools and with stakeholders to make that happen. The second one is to educate young people about the reforms that just passed, and to consider implementing working groups and task forces to look at how these reforms are going to affect young people and make sure that young people are part of that conversation. If we're going to implement pre-registration in our high schools, which is happening, we better make sure young people are part of the educational programs that we are designing to make sure that young people feel incentivized to participate. And so consider things like that. The third thing, like my fellow colleague mentioned earlier, creating a youth advisory group or representative on this committee and amending the charter. Finally, creating a CUNY-wide working group to design the implementation of the CUNY reform that I mentioned earlier. We applaud this board's commitment to increasing youth turnout in New York City, and we encourage this board to take affirmative steps to engage young people on the issues that matter to us in the political process. And I'm more than happy to work with you all on that moving forward. Thank you.
So can Selena Urena and Kristen Gonzalez join us? Are they okay? There.
Okay, cool. I'm Dusty Owens. I'm a rising sophomore at Barnard College, a part of Columbia University. And I helped found the Columbia Votes organization that helps register voters and also request absentee ballots from different states. I'm also part of the Roosevelt Democratic Access Initiative, and I helped Let New York Vote initiatives in Albany, as well as sending a singing telegram to Governor Cuomo on Valentine's Day. Don't look that up. The video is really embarrassing. But as we've heard today, there are lots of reasons why young people don't turn out to vote and feel generally rejected by the democratic process in New York City and beyond. And I have kind of like two reasons in like two ways to help get out the vote and further engage youth in the democratic process. So first, last September, I signed up to be a poll worker for election day operations, and at the poll worker training, I was the youngest one there by about 70 years. We took 4 bathroom breaks, 3 smoke breaks. It was a very long day. And in general, I think that would be a mutually beneficial situation for both the youth that would get involved as poll workers, and I think more people should get involved as poll workers, especially as we just passed electronic poll books in Albany. As we add more technology, it'd be helpful to have more young people helping operate that technology. Additionally, it does pay very well and is a good opportunity for young people. And I think it also would provide a lot of insight into the democratic process behind the scenes for young people, as well as expedite the process at the polling sites. People in this room that I just spoke to waited 2 hours at polls during the midterms. I waited 3 hours in September. It's not great. We should probably work on that. And then second, I think a lot of the reason that young people don't vote on campuses, vote in New York, is because they're not necessarily in New York. Of people that I've spoken today, a lot of us go to college in different states. We leave for jobs in different states, research opportunities, and the absentee ballot request process is extremely difficult. So while sure, we talked about the fact that not every school has like request forms for registering to vote. There's more forms that you have to fill out after you register to vote. You need to request an absentee ballot. If you don't have a driver's license, you need to request a request form for an absentee ballot. You're sending like 3 envelopes at that point. I don't know where my post office is. Many of us probably don't know where our post office is. It becomes a big ordeal. And I know that I unfortunately wasn't able to vote in the June primary because my absentee ballot only came to my parents' home 2 days before the election, which was very disappointing to me as I had worked on various campaigns related to that election. I think in general, related to the poll workers, I think advertising that opportunity on campuses and shifting training to be on campuses rather than in senior centers across the city is a really important step. And in terms of requesting absentee ballots and registering voters, I think it's really important that we have more information on what to do if your absentee ballot doesn't come. That process is a lot more intuitive. It's not just reforms that we need to currently advocate for in Albany, it's reforms that we need to make to all the systems that are currently in place. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for creating this space. I think it's so important to have our voices represented in the room, and thank you all for being so honest about your experiences and even taking your time to come and share your perspective. My name's Kristen. I was born and raised in Elmhurst, Queens, and I am a member of Queens Community Board 4, Elmhurst. I saw a little heart hand over the heart. I serve in Queens Community Board 4, and I want to thank you all for the great work you've done around, making sure that we have early voting and pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds. But obviously, as we've heard today, there's a lot more that we can be doing. And I think part of that, I'd really like to echo the sentiments that so many of you have brought up, which is the fact that we need more civic engagement and civic courses for youth. And as a key part of that, have an intersectional approach. Some communities have different barriers based on ability or even history to voting. And I think if we talk about a civic engagement or civic force for schools, we should also talk about how different communities have different political histories. When we're able to connect to that history and see our place in voting, we're able to, it motivates students. Studies show that more insight into the history of voting rights will actually increase civic engagement. So I definitely wanted to add that to the conversation. On top of that, I wanted to also call out that we need to reinvest in voting infrastructure. I think a key part of voting barriers for New York City is the fact that so much of our voting infrastructure is outdated. And then in addition to that, if we saw in the past Queen's DA race, no matter who you voted for or who you were interested in voting in, the fact that the race came down to 100 affidavit ballots that were invalidated, it shows that even when we vote, sometimes those aren't counted based on technicalities. Part of that was also based on, I know 21 ballots had machine recount issues. So that's something that should be occurring. And then finally, I think I'd like to echo a lot of the recommendations this committee has put out in terms of restoring voting rights to parolees, automatic voter registration, changing the party enrollment deadline, the Voter-Friendly Ballot Act, and then allowing poll workers to serve in split shifts so that, as I believe someone just mentioned, it's a lot easier process. So I wanted to, formally add that to the statement. And again, thank you all for your time. But I would love to see continued collaboration between all the folks in this room through task forces or more events like these to make sure that all of this gets done. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Selena Urena. Briefly about myself, I'm 24 years old. I go to LaGuardia Community College. I'm a poet and I've published some of my works at the LaGuardia Community College, and then I turned into theater, and now I express my writing through being a mime. I grew up in a Hispanic Democratic family, and voting was always something that was very important. When I was young, I didn't understand it much younger because it just seemed boring, and also something that I felt like my family did it, so I felt like I didn't need to do it myself. It wasn't until I got older and I started seeing the world turning into something that was not okay, and knowing that I could have just changed that by voting. When I was legal of age, I remember voting for the first time and having that being very life-changing, and remembering my grandparents being very proud of me because coming from an older generation, that is something that's very important to them. And in some ways, they inspired me to keep voting because they were voting for something that they believed in. I believe that the youth should inspire other youths to vote, because when we hear it coming from our youth, people listen more rather than when it's coming from someone older. At least that was from my personal experience. And I feel like it's more powerful that way, because when the younger generation cares, they can encourage the even younger generation to be on the right path for voting. And I think spreading awareness through social media and also personal conversations, because when we mention the issues that we care about, we don't really realize that it can all turn around and be changed. We don't really realize that our voices can be heard, and that the same issues that are important for us, we can change all of them. Definitely making social groups on the media is the best way to get people to vote, because the media is the major thing that people usually turn into. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. I'm really inspired, and it's a great testimony. I'd like to open the floor right now to, if there's anybody who is here who would like to give some testimony or inspired who hasn't signed up. So make sure that you announce your name so we have it. And come up. One of the three. I see three hands. So one of the three of you come up and join the front. We'll give you some time to speak. There was the third person. Oh, okay. Yeah. Why don't you all come up and just do 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Hi, guys. I'm glad to see so many young people, and this actually makes me feel really young. Despite my appearances, I'm 14 years old. When I tell most people I'm going into freshman year, they say, "So what college?" And I say, "What are you talking about?"
I'm sorry to stop you, but could you give me your name?
Peter Kasapis.
Okay. Thank you.
I've been I'm an organizer right now for Michael Janaris. He's in his re-election campaign. I'm also an organizer for Costa Constantinides, who's running for borough president. But the most political work I've ever done in my life was this past summer for the Queen's DA's race. I was an intern coordinator, and I'd like to thank the board, and I'd like to thank their movements to inspire younger people. But personally, by myself, I contacted over 4,000 of my peers and raised 80 volunteers for the Greg Lezak campaign for Queens District Attorney by myself. I raised more of my friends than the entire rest of the campaign, so I feel like I'm very proud of that. Second of all, I have 2 problems with elections, and one is we're all Democrats here, or mainly Democrats. I don't want to assume anything. I would like to hope we're mainly Democrats here, but I see a lot of division in the Democratic Party. I was harassed multiple times from people from Melinda Katz, Betty Lugo, if you know her campaign. Unfortunately, I hope you don't know her campaign, and Tiffany Caban's campaign. They all harassed me, and one of my friends who's very nervous, I actually asked him if he wanted to come. He was too nervous to speak in public, but he was harassed by this woman, and I feel extremely ashamed of myself. We were campaigning in the Far Rockaways, and he's a Hispanic kid from Jackson Heights, and he felt so uncomfortable. I said, "I'm really sorry. Like, you can go home right now. I'll deal with this." And I feel horrible that we should feel scared going out and campaigning. I mean, I've been interviewed by a few reporters, and they were like, "Oh, you've really been harassed? You're 14 years old." And I'm like, "Yeah, that happens sometimes." The second thing, information is obviously important. You've all said it, and I'd like to open the discussion to not only our youth, but when I was talking to people from all over the borough, I was talking to people in Jamaica, East Elmhurst, Maspeth, I knew more than 90% of adults, maybe 99% of adults about the election. I'm 14 years old. I should be worrying about what high school I'm going to, but I'm worrying about getting up at 5 a.m. to go to these polling locations, to start making calls and to start knocking on doors. So if I can do it at 14, people who are in their 30s, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, past that, should all make the effort to go out. And the last thing, information, knowledge is the light of democracy. I don't know who said that, but it was probably some old Greek guy 3,000 years ago. But I'm afraid to say we're in our darkest hour. In our democracy, we are run by fear, we are run by hatred, and we are running away from taking a stand against Republicans or people who are fear-mongering and controlling us through our fear. Through information and through knowledge exclusively, we can create the right path for our democracy. Thank you.
Okay, so 2 points before I begin my speech. Number one, all those speeches from these high schoolers are putting me to shame because they're beautiful and they're just so smart. And I do college debate and I should be good at speeches, but I feel insecure. That's how amazing you guys are. And then number two, I do college debate. So if I see that time sign go up and I have 1 minute left and I got another 500 words, I am going to speed talk it so fast that you may not be able to keep up. So just a heads up there. All right, so this speech is going to be a little bit less personal than the speeches that have come before it. I'm more concerned with some structural issues that I think that we haven't really talked about. But first, my name is Emmanuel Zepeda, and I'm the team leader at GenVote's community chapter. I've been involved in activism since your ages. My start was participatory budgeting.
In CUNY, where I go to school, administrators and program directors have told me not to worry about registration in my school, insisting that programs entrenched in CUNY are taking care of the matter. However, nobody I know is aware of these resources to get people registered, and less than nobody is using them. It's very hard to get to resources buried under a mountain if you're not even provided a shovel. And I also want to bring up the SCOTUS decision hosted versus Randolph Institute very briefly, which I think is important, and I'll explain why shortly, which will allow states to renew the illegal process of purging voters for not voting. This decision was a pedantic one, and one that managed to dismiss the racist and oppressive use of the historical voter purging in the intent behind the law. So why am I talking about this? Well, in New York City, some my age, enough to be mentioned, expressed distrust in the Board of Elections, particularly the Brooklyn Board. The fallout of the board's improper conduct with regards to voter purging between 2014 and 2015 has not dissipated entirely and is still strongly felt amongst people my age. In the mass misinformation age, I also think it's worth reiterating that we educate people to distinguish between affidavit, absentee, and regular ballots, and it's really a simple start to ensuring legitimacy in New York democracy. Yes, goddamn it. All right. In terms of solutions, I want to say that adding government to help work the polls and increasing the number of poll workers is an easy beginning. Incorporating students is a good way to get political favor, and the next generation of voters often concerned with overarching problems such as climate and deteriorating opportunities. Exploring street-side voter registration for those who are lucky enough to lobby registration requires a certain amount of negotiation with historically obstinate bodies, but developing political consciousness as a matter of geography is a good way to tie a goal to a narrative. Localism works. Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't note that a wave of neoliberal ideology in the late 20th century tried and was in many ways successful in their attempts to swallow civic society, especially during the urban crisis of the 1970s. The way that most impacted my friends was by instituting tuition fees at CUNY, where today our infrastructure is deteriorating to the point that we have had leaks in our classrooms that haven't been repaired in months. To energize and engage individuals in democracy, it's important to speak to their issues. I'll leave it at that. How to fix this particular problem and manage voter rolls in a city as big and as fluid as New York, where many genuinely don't know how to, broadly speaking, as we've seen before, navigate bureaucracy is a task for someone smarter than me. And while participatory budgeting is an anomaly, it's a really good first step. And I think there should be more resources invested into it, not just at the high school level, but at the college level, so people can see a tangential way in which their government money is going to like projects in their neighborhoods. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Actually, my testimony is actually in the form of a letter. So actually, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Lane. I am here right now to testify. I am born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and I go to SUNY Plattsburgh and heading towards my sophomore years. I am also a senator for my school's student body government. When I grew up, I wanted to be involved in the video game industry by being a video game analysis, developer, video game entertainer, or video game tester. I also want to be involved in government by being an aide for a representative, or even be a representative myself. When I was 18, I was motivated and inspired by my AP government teacher. Everyone know her name. Her name is Catherine Dickman. To be politically and civically involved, I was inspired by the way that she taught the course and by the way the overall topics she taught me. I voted via absentee ballot and polling site. I occasionally volunteer in campaigns, including Cynthia Nixon's governor campaign and Tiffany Cabin's district attorney campaign. My mother has negative perspectives when it comes to politics, and people like me who are interested and want to further engage with it as a future career, as she believes that politicians are targeting the young for support and using young people for leverage and for labor, which I don't really completely agree with my mom for that, which I'm very motivated by my government teacher. I am currently interning in my district senator's office until August 16th via SYP, in which I am also acquainted with my assemblywoman and some of her colleagues. In some aspect, I see that some issues I care about are being addressed. For example, problems associated with the MTA, by holding the MTA accountable when it comes to their poor services and increasing city funding for important things like housing, school education, and also transportation. However, I feel like some issues some issues I have aren't addressed. For example, voting as absentee ballots takes time to process, in which if I was to update my address, it would take at most three plus business days to process, and lack of notifications or reminders for future elections, especially for students who aren't around New York City but is within New York State. For the closed primary law that doesn't allow anyone who are not Democrat or Republican the ability to vote in any primary, and lack of programs and engagement when it comes to civic and political involvement for young adults. These are issues for me because when a college student applies for an absentee ballot, the address will be processed, but if he or she tries to update her address, the address change takes time, which is vital when it comes to voting, in which I wasn't able. When it comes to voting, which I was able to vote for the governor's election because of that issue. There are also issues because if a college student who is within New York State wants to vote but doesn't completely know when the elections are happening and don't get that notification, these are also issues because the law doesn't allow a full representation of voters as independents, and people who are in third-party voters have to wait until general elections or a referendum to be allowed to vote, which isn't fair in my opinion. Our local government could help solve these issues by making the absentee ballot process more accessible and easy by making an online database and an online website that handles absentee ballots and voting as a whole. Our local government can implement a ballot system where voters can choose what ballot they'll vote on despite their party affiliations for more voter turnout. Just like what I said earlier, for independents, Democrats who have a change of perspective. And our local government should also create a program that allows college students who are going out of New York City an easier way to get a ballot by putting in their school's information and signing a release form. Our local government can also create a citywide committee dedicated for young adult leaders so that we as adults can be able to express our opinions on how we can improve our city and how we can make more young adults like us to be more involved. I feel like these proposed ideas can work with the help of the state of New York and with modern technology. Thank you very much for your time to read my recommendation, and have a good night.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Ordonez, and I was born and raised in the community of West Harlem, and I am a student at Columbia University right now. And that brings me to my topic. A lot of people told me that I couldn't make it to Columbia University, but I made it to Columbia University. I empowered a lot of people in my community to say, I can apply to Columbia, I can now make it to Columbia. That's exactly what we need to do with this, to encourage young people to vote, to encourage young people to be more civically engaged. We need to encourage them to vote and empower them. And by empowering them, we're going to make them be more civically engaged, and we're going to have more of you guys here, a greater auditorium, more of us testifying our stories. And I didn't come with note cards. I didn't come with my laptop. I'm speaking from my experiences, from my heart. This is what I've been through. And in my community, there's a very low voter turnout from young people. And the best thing we can do is create, yes, youth councils here. I want to see more youth here, and community boards. Let's get people that look like the community in the community boards. Let's get more youth there. We need to encourage them to get out and vote. And the best way to do that is to empower them, even for the smallest positions like county committee, judicial delegate. You know that you only need to be 18 to run. I just finished my campaign for county committee, and I'm 19 years old. I was 19 years old at that time, and I was the youngest Latina too. win county committee, one of the youngest. But many people don't know that. And we need to get that out there. If many of you guys ran for county committee, you would be captains in your block. You would get more people like you to go out and vote, to run for county committee, for district delegate. And that's what we need. We need more of us in politics, more of us out there that look like us, representing us, to encourage us to vote, to encourage us to run. That is what we need. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So to close out our hearing tonight, we're going to hear from our street team. So I want you guys to come on up.
Okay. Hi, my name is Maya Wisniewski, and I'm a member of this year's Summer Street team. Before I get started with a brief statement, maybe not so brief, on behalf of our team, I wanted to give the board the rest of our written testimonies that we've received from many young people. I think we have about 10 in this binder, as well as many other young people who are interested but weren't able to participate. So this is for you.
So this will scan into send with everybody and put on the website.
Yes. And I hope you guys get an opportunity to look those over. But first, thank you guys for taking the time today to hear all the testimonies that were shared with us. And to the testifiers, thank you guys so much for voicing your experiences and opinions. Your drive and dedication to your communities and work is exactly what we want to highlight here today, that young people like you are not an anomaly. This is not surprising. New York City has a long history of engagement and activism, and young people are no exception. This is something that our team has seen time and time again over the course of the summer. To give some background, we spent the last few months working with young people ranging from 14 to 24 years old from across the city. And by the end of July, we had met in workshops, in classrooms, and in more informal discussion with more than 1,400 young people. Beyond providing them with information, we wanted to understand their perspectives on civic engagement. We repeatedly asked questions like, what does civic engagement mean to you? And do you believe you and your community are civically engaged? More often than not, and as our team suspected, the answer is yes, even if individuals didn't recognize what they were doing as civic engagement. Civic engagement exists on a spectrum: reading the news, discussing issues with your friends and family, volunteering in your school or neighborhood, engaging with city agencies or officials via social media were all common amongst individuals we met. We also met students who are leading activists in their schools, who are campaigning in the city, who are making widespread efforts to educate themselves and their community. Even though we are the voting demographic with the lowest turnout, many youth we spoke to recognize voting as part of the spectrum. Yet much of the public tends to believe that young people don't care, are apathetic, citing our significantly low voter turnout as evidence. We hope that people here today can see that the notion that young people are apathetic is far from the truth. Our agency has a history of youth outreach and programming, but based on what our team has learned this summer and what we've heard today, it's clear that we need to rethink how we actually engage with young people. Our team would like to offer specific, pragmatic recommendations to continue this conversation with one primary goal in mind: to meet the young people of New York City where they're at and put their voices at the forefront of our future programming. First, more outreach and qualitative research needs to be done. What actually accounts for the gap between registration and turnout? Most often, young people noted a severe lack of access to information, a barrier which affects not just ability, but motivation, something we've heard over and over again today. The majority of the students that we met with had never heard of NYC Votes, said that their schools had never received NYC Votes programming or registration drives. Students also often pointed to a larger systemic issue as well: a lack of comprehensive civic education in New York City public schools. Again, something we've heard today. Often, students in low-income schools and from minority backgrounds have the least access to whatever civic programming is available as well, and our agency can help fill these gaps. As we've heard today, civic engagement cannot be separated from education. Any curriculum or program we develop needs to be cognizant and validating of the wide range of experiences and perspectives that young people bring to the table. Young people may not vote to the same degree as older individuals, but it is misguided to believe that young people don't care. Not all young people have a background in government or politics, but many are still keenly aware of the influence that these entities have on our daily lives and environments. To do this, we also recommend that NYC Votes makes a commitment to engaging young leaders from across the city through a leadership program. We want to harness the knowledge and motivation that so many young people have already shown
and give them tools, resources, and support with which they can lead these workshops themselves and increase outreach to young people in their own communities in a way our agency or the street team alone never could. Lastly, and perhaps most relevant here today, this conversation needs to not only continue, but significantly amplify the voices of young people. To do this, we recommend that a formal youth board be established, led by and consisting entirely of youth from across New York City who can help guide our agency's work. This allows for students who are highly engaged to serve as liaisons and to not only deliver feedback from their communities, but also to mentor other young people on the board in becoming leaders themselves. We recommend that this become a priority for the board, especially as we go into 2020. To wrap up, we want to thank our testifiers again and the board for participating today and what is only the start of a larger conversation. A quick thank you to our team, Sabrina Castillo, Sean O'Leary, Matthew Pitt, and William Fowler for the support and help putting this together. And thank you to Mary Young, Winnie Ning, Gina Chung, Kitty Chan, and Crystal Choi for their efforts leading up to this event. And lastly, a special thank you to our executive director, Amy Loprest, for her enthusiasm for young people and for her support of all the work our street team has done. We hope that this has been a valuable and informative experience for everyone listening today, young people, adult audience members, and board alike. And thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to be here. We challenge everyone here to continue this conversation. Share what you've learned today about this on social media using your advocacy placards, which if you haven't received, we can make sure you get one on the way out. Or start a conversation among family, friends, and coworkers. And lastly, we ask you to spread the word about a new piece of legislation that has been mentioned a couple times in this hearing, which allows 16-year-olds to pre-register beginning in January of 2020. For our agency to truly address youth civic engagement, young people need to have a seat at the table. And we know that the dialogue we witnessed today is only the beginning. Thank you.
So do we have any comments from the committee or?
Yeah, I have a comment. I want to thank you. I found the testimony really inspiring, but I also want to say something to you too. A lot of people reference the fact that young people don't know anything about civics, but the truth of the matter is this is across the generations. And I think it's a problem. I don't know how to solve it. I was at my last job. I worked for City University at Medgar Evers. We had a civic engagement series of workshops that was funded by somebody. I don't remember who it was, but it was for all ages because this is not a problem that's unique to young people. So thank you again.
Yeah, I too want to thank all of you who testified and all of you who attended tonight. This is, I think this can really help to take the work of this committee to a new level. And I'm anxious to be part of conversations on how we can incorporate what we heard tonight into our work.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming and staying so late. I know we're about an hour later than we had anticipated ending, but thank you all for coming and thank you for your recommendations. And these definitely will be forming part of the basis of how we move forward. And as we make our plans for the 2020 and the 2021 elections and how we reach out to people in New York, this would be important information for us. So thank you very much.